everybody. I'm excited to be here. I love following somebody like Michelle who grabs someone, and here's why. The church is not me or Sergio or Donovan or really any one of you, but what we've been talking about for the last several weeks is that the church is all of us that put Christ first and follow his teachings, right? And so when we see that, when you see somebody grab somebody and bring them up, that is what it feels like. That's the feeling of a church family. And if you're not a part of that, that's really unfortunate because that's an awesome thing to be a part of. So I just love that God is here. Again, my name is Ferrin Cole, and here at AVL City Church, I'm actually just one of the many leaders that God uses to speak, and that is also about being part of a family. As you heard, many of you know that we're about to enter into a hashtag series, and that's just a trendy way of saying that we are talking over the next several weeks, covering some of the most controversial topics, and we already know that the city and our country is completely polarized on these issues. We know people are on one side or the other, but we also know that the church must deal with these issues. We must. If we don't, we end up silent and doing the wrong thing. So we must deal with them because Jesus would. And as we do talk about these things, we want to be mindful that our outward attempts to fix things that are really inward issues won't create lasting change. And let me explain that for just a second. Everything that we do, everything that the church is about, involves both outward and inward actions. You can't really talk about one without talking about the other. Whether it's abortion or poverty or racism or economics or politics or any society issue, underneath it, there's a heart issue with us as individuals. And my prayer for us as followers of Jesus is that we would be humble enough to know and recognize that both personally, meaning me, and what Galen said, meaning him, as he looks inwardly at his life, and I look inwardly at my life, that you would join us. Because we're not just going to talk about collectively how we handle issues as a church or a society. Because you can't talk about outward actions without talking about inward attitudes. God is not done healing the wounds here inside of us or in our community. He's not done teaching us. We're not arrived, right? We haven't already become perfect at everything. And so the reality is, as a group, we know we haven't received and arrived at the most Christ-like response. And today we're going to look at one example of how Jesus approaches needs in a culture and in a society. And I'm excited about that. We've actually got a slide that they're going to put up on here. We're going to read through a scripture together. It's probably a story that many of you know. Go ahead and put that slide up on there. It actually comes from the book of John. And so we'll get that up there so that I can read it to you. This is a story of if you're remembering, Jesus feeds 5,000 people. Now there's estimates that say that only the men were counted, and so there could be up to 20,000. Big crowd either way. This is what happens. After Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain and he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Next slide. Lifting up his eyes then and seeing that large crowd that's coming toward him, Jesus said, Philip, which was one of his disciples, he turns to him and he says, where are we going to buy bread so that these people can eat? He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii, in other words, 6 months of wages worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to even get a little. So big crowd. Next slide. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. I think that's kind of funny. I don't know. It's like they found a kid with lunch and they were like, come here. So, what do you got in that bag? So he's got 5 loaves of barley and 2 fish. And Andrew's like, look, but what are they for so many people? Like, you're not going to be able to do much with this. Jesus says, this is so interesting to me. Jesus says, have the people sit down. And then this seemingly random phrase, now there was much grass in the place. I thought, was the author don't worry, it wasn't a hardship. They all had seats. But he says, there's much grass in the place. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Okay, so you've got 5,000 people that are now sitting down. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. Now, I'm a big dude. I like a lot of food. That's kind of amazing. And Jesus, when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost, So they gathered them up and they filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. What just happened? That is an incredible story. That is an incredible story. And one of the things that stands out to me with the timeless truths in this text that's so huge, go ahead and go to this next slide. This is a big deal to me. Jesus is both preaching and healing. So he's not just drawing a crowd and talking to them. And if you're honest, the church is sometimes guilty of that. We gather people together, we lecture them, half of you fall asleep, and then we go home and we say, good church. But the reality is, Jesus is doing something that impacts society so much with his leadership, both in what he said and what he actually does in his community, that he's actually become somewhat of a celebrity by this point. And this is one of his last public appearances. Jesus is both preaching and healing, and he uses this model of generosity in a really deep way. He sees their physical need and he sees their spiritual needs, and he doesn't refuse one or the other. He actually addresses them both. And sometimes when we face current issues, we actually only address one side. So I'm going to tell you what to do as a husband. I'm guilty of telling my wife how to feel. She loves that, let me tell you. Don't feel this way. And she's like, oh, that's so much better. I don't feel that way. Jesus doesn't just take the outward approach to solving problems by telling people how they ought to be. He actually changes their reality. And I think that's a big deal because sometimes when we see society-based problems, we take things like voting, for example. There's nothing wrong with voting. I advocate voting. But voting is it's a society-based solution to problems we face. Sometimes we see psychology-based solutions. And so we go into marital counseling, and then we learn how not to communicate to each other, and so we adjust how we communicate. Some problems we see are financially based, so we pool our resources and we put a financial Band-Aid on something. Now, all of these things can be excellent paths to solving problems, but none of them address the heart issues that are often present. And quite frankly, if we have sin in our hearts, then the outward action of voting just solidifies our inward broken nature. We just took our sin and now made it into a broken system of law. That's terrifying. When we have sin in our hearts, adjusting how I communicate with my wife, if I'm still a selfish person, it just masks my broken nature, and I promise you, it leaks out in other ways. If you don't address the heart issues, pooling resources for outward change won't create anything lasting because we haven't really addressed the actual problems in our heart. And I want to emphasize that if we take our eyes off the heart issue and we address just the problems with shallow solutions, we're only really seeing half of this picture. And Jesus doesn't do that. The spiritual internal need, he just combines it with the outward need. So he sees these people coming forward. And I think before we get into how we respond outwardly with the generosity of Jesus and how we respond as followers of Jesus in his example, I think we actually do just need to pause here and pray for our hearts. And so, God, I ask right now in this place that you would help us follow Jesus, that we would confess that we're sometimes filled with bitterness and greed and lack of compassion and empathy. We're sometimes narrow-minded and say hurtful things. We're sometimes insensitive and we don't think of others' needs. And sometimes we're just exhausted and impatient. And God, sometimes we're guilty that we surround ourselves with voices that only agree with us, and we don't actively build relationships with people in our communities. So nobody is coming to us, and we don't have any crowds following. God, change our hearts so that we can be the hope in this world. Help us to be the light in the darkness and not just join the darkness on either side of an issue. Give us your eyes to see the crowds. Amen. So back to this crowd approaching Jesus. He sees them and he knows them because he sees the inside condition of their heart as they approach with their outward needs. So yes, they're coming to him because he's famous, but they're also coming to him because Jesus knows they have a deeper thirst. So he knows his audience, and it's Passover. Passover is one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals. It's a big celebration from Old Testament times. If you remember, it actually comes and celebrates the Exodus from Egypt. So all these Israelite slaves in Egypt leave in a hurry, and they're actually cared for and taken care of by God in the wilderness, this massive multitude of people, right? And so Passover is the celebration. That's what season it is. It's kind of like if you're here in the United States and someone says, it's Christmas. They don't mean it's Christmas Day, they mean it's Christmas season, and there's a festive that surrounds it, and people sort of resonate with that. In Jewish culture, Passover is huge. They celebrate their freedom from slavery. They also take a pilgrimage from where they are to Jerusalem, and he's in the upper north corner of the Sea of Galilee. So you've got a bunch of people on the road already. It's kind of like saying you're traveling during leaf season in Asheville. So is everybody. And so the roads are filled with people, and there's a crowd coming towards Jesus, and he knows that the majority of them are probably Jews out on the road traveling. So he knows his audience, he knows it's Passover, and as Jesus' popularity grew, these people altered their course to come see him. It's also interesting that Passover is directly connected to bread, of all things, the sustaining and powerful providing of the multitude of bread. Remember the manna in the wilderness where God kept sustaining them? And now Jesus is in the wilderness, and he's about to sustain this small multitude literally with bread from heaven and in an actual miracle. And I think that's an incredible tie-in there. And then just the super normal physical reality that they are hungry, right? Go ahead and go to the next slide. So Jesus sees this audience, and he knows who's coming. And he sees them, and the crowds are drawn to his compassion. And the reason why I say that is they've seen and heard of his miracles. They too want miracles, and they're approaching Jesus because for some reason, he cares. And this is what's common knowledge amongst them, that he cares, his compassion. And I have to ask, and it's not to make you feel guilty today, but are you, as a follower of Jesus, known for your compassion? If I scanned your Facebook, and would I find that you're consistently compassionate and patient with our culture? That is a hard question. Are you known for taking compassion on the crowds? What about when a crowd is categorized as homeless or in poverty, and you hear they have need? Is your heart filled with compassion? Don't get me wrong, there is truth and grace, right? So there are reasons for poverty, and some of us feel compelled to constantly share those reasons with people. And I think there is a time for that, I do. But are you known for your compassion? Jesus absolutely took time to share truth, but he had this constant tension between grace and truth. When do I share what I believe is true and accurate and a way forward? And when am I compassionate? Part of doing miracles and extending the hands of God to people who are hurting and in need. Are you seeing the physical needs of those in our society as you approach the crowds? Are you looking at the crowds that you see on the news every night as both spiritually in need and physically in need? And we categorize these crowds in our culture all the time. We call them rich or poor, or immigrants or natives, or black or white, or Republican or Democrat, or yellow or purple, or single or married, or gay or straight, or teenager or old, or retired or widowed. And we have categories for everybody. And we attach belief systems onto those. But my question is, are you known for your compassion? Is that what people think when they think of you? That guy loves people. That lady is so compassionate. That lady knows the truth, but still ministers to the need in spite of their brokenness. They connect beyond the fact that this person is totally wrong and doesn't know Jesus. They still love and serve, and they're becoming famous for their compassion. Is that said of followers of Jesus today? Is it said of you? Jesus could have rebuked the crowd and shared the cold-hard truth with them that their outward actions are fake and choking their relationship with God, and they're really just ultimately religious people that don't even know the Father, and he does share that later. But in this crowd, he's overwhelmed with compassion and he sees their needs. Now also, I mentioned this earlier about this abundant grass on the hillside, and I think it's weird that he told them to sit down, but check this out. Jesus knows they're Jewish. He knows that they would know their Psalms. And in this moment, he fulfills prophecy that David wrote about hundreds of years before in Psalm 23. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters." What an amazing thing. Jesus is by the Sea of Galilee, still waters. There's abundant grass everywhere. John goes out of his way to tell you they're in a pasture. I think that's incredible. And it says he makes you lie down. In other words, he will put his rest upon you. He sees a crowd coming toward him, and Jesus puts his rest on them. He actually commands them to sit down. That's why, and I think that's important. The next thing that Jesus does, which I think is interesting, is that it's not just a nod to David. Jesus turns to his disciples, and he says to them, and I think this is a little bit funny because I'm always like, Jesus, why are you trying to trick your closest friends? But he's not. He knows what he's going to do, but he asks them for the solution first. So it's a little bit interesting to know that he turns to them and asks them if they know where to get bread. Right? So he wants to know, do you know where to get bread for these people? And he turns to them, and I even wondered, why did he ask Philip? There's like 12 guys there. Why didn't he ask Judas or one of the other guys? And he's like, where do we get bread? And instead, he turns to Philip. And so I did actually look it up on a map. Philip's from near there. So is Andrew and Simon Peter. So the three other characters that are in this, the two disciples that are brothers, they're actually invited to participate because God knows they know their area. So Jesus says, hey, you are from Asheville. I'm inviting you to participate in what I'm doing here. And he turns to Simon Peter, and he turns to Andrew, and he turns to Philip, and he goes with the local guys. That's interesting. It's also interesting that they don't have the solution. And if you turn to most local guys and you say, what are we going to do? We don't really have the solution other than to lock arms with Jesus and be invited to participate in what he's doing. That's huge. Jesus already knows what he's going to do. There's actually a miracle brimming here, and he knows what he's going to do. But he turns to his followers and he asks them, how are you going to be a part of the solution? And I think that's huge because Jesus actually lets his followers, us today, participate in the work of the kingdom. He already knows how he's going to use you. He already knows how that person that you're talking to is going to come into salvation and understand who Jesus is. And he asks Philip, because Philip's from Bethsaida nearby, and then Andrew and Simon Peter come up. I don't know if it sounds like they didn't mug a kid for his lunch, but that's the key. I keep going to this like lunch scene in a cafeteria where they're all hungry and they look at that kid with the lunch, right? And I know that didn't happen because it says the boy was there and he brought forward the loaves and the fish. And so here we have a generous kid coming in and saying that he is going to help out. And I guess the question is, how are you and I going to be involved in the miracles that Jesus does if you don't show up, first of all? If you don't show up and understand that you're invited to be a part of the solution, how are you ever going to join what God is doing? And Jesus uses the seemingly insignificant, and he does it all the time because he does it with me and he does it with you. You don't have to be rich and powerful and have enough money to feed 5,000 people. You have to show up and present what you have to Jesus, and he uses it. And he invites us to be a part of what he's doing, whether you have a ton of money or almost nothing. He has it. Go ahead and shut this slide off for a second. I'm not quite ready for that one. But I wanted to put this in front of you and say, okay, we know that God has a plan for us. We know that he's inviting us into this. And you might be saying, but I don't have any ideas. I don't know how we're going to do what we think God wants us to do. Or better yet, maybe you don't even know what God wants you to do. You just see a bunch of hungry people, and you have no idea how to meet that need. Welcome to the church. We're looking inwardly at hearts of people who are spiritually starving in our community. And we're looking outwardly at the needs of people who have legitimate concerns of how they're going to pay their rent and feed their children, and get access to health care, and navigate systems. Welcome to the church. The church is God's number one answer and solution for saving the world, and the church is us. And it's not powerless us, it's us locking arms with Jesus, offering the only lunch we have so that he can multiply it and do something bigger than any one of us could imagine. And that is absolutely huge, because you are not insignificant if you lock arms with Jesus and you show up with what you have. You have a purpose and a part of a big plan that is bigger than what you imagine the solution is going to be. And I'm not just talking about social issues. I'm talking about Asheville being saved. I'm talking about citizens of Asheville coming to Jesus because they see that you see both their spiritual need and starvation and their outward need, and you are known for compassion. That would be a massive change from how the church is currently understood by our culture. And it starts here, and it starts with examining our hearts like we did earlier, asking for humility, confessing our greed and selfishness and all the things that we just naturally do. It's about surrendering that and showing up. Sometimes we show up with lunch in our hands, and sometimes we show up with an axe to grind. And God doesn't really need your axe. He's actually a mighty God and more powerful. He parts the Red Seas. He wipes out armies. He uses ways that are completely unknown to man to not only conquer, but to absolutely change hearts. And maybe you didn't know you were invited to be a part of that solution. But if there's one thing that God intended the church to be, it was hope for the world. And you can't have hope for the world if you're holding it all to yourself. And I tell you this because it's so easy for me as a person to get into a rut where I only surround myself with the people that agree with me. Right? So I only watch one side of the news because it resonates with how I feel in my experience. And then I only hang out with these people because they're my neighbors, they live in my neighborhood, and we just happen to share the same socio-economic era, and so gathering together is just easier. Or we don't cross the boundaries between what separates us because those people are messy. And they're looking at us going, those Christians are a mess. And so there's this divide where we don't build bridges between our communities sometimes because we're truly looking at being comfortable. And to present Jesus Christ as the bread of life to a community is going to require seeing their hunger. Here's the real kicker here, that God uses some unimportant boy in the crowd to be a part of something bigger, and I think that's huge, but you and I are that kid. You are. You don't have enough to solve the problem. I don't care what your problem is, you don't have it. God is the solution. And he takes what this boy offers and he does something amazing. Go ahead and put that last screen up, that one, yep. The one that is about global change. Pull out your phones. If you're at home watching along, I'm going to walk you through this real quick. Pull out your phones if you're in this audience and grab the website givingwhatwecan.org. Just go there real quick, because this is a perspective change. If you want to know how you are that boy, check it out. Givingwhatwecan.org. I'm going to explain. Don't disappear if you're watching from home. You can go to this in a minute. We'll actually post that link in the comments here on the live stream. This site, givingwhatwecan.org, is a site that uses really unique data and is backed up by some really awesome economic science. If you scroll down to where it says, "How rich are you?" in giant white bold letters or red letters, depending on your device, you can actually enter in your income, how many people live with you, and it uses mid-2019 economic data from around the world to tell you your financial situation compared to the entire rest of the world. The reason why that's fascinating is because you are about to find out that you are stinking rich. You have so much lunch. You have so much lunch. If you take a minute to type that in, you can see it. Here's an example. A household of 4 people in Asheville, so I chose the United States, with an income after taxes of just $40,000 for 4 people. You are richer than 86% of the world if you make $40,000 in Asheville and have 4 people dependent on that income. You are in the richest 14% of the global population. You make 5.3 times the global median income. If you literally took 10% of your finances and you gave them away, and you took $4,000 of your $40,000, you would still be in the top 15% of the richest people in the world. And this is economic data. It actually doesn't even focus on the reality that we have education and access to healthcare and clean drinking water and indoor plumbing and systems that provide for us and an infrastructure with roads and the fact that most of us have cars. It ignores all of your possessions and the realities of American wealth, which happen to be things like plumbing and indoor electricity and clean drinking water, all those things. Throw all that out, and just looking at income, you may be in the top richest 15% of the world simply by your income compared to median. I think that's huge. And the reason why we share that global perspective is so that you can realize that sometimes we get focused on the lunch we have and the lunch we don't have. And we often don't really look around and see that we're the only people with lunch. And so when this kid shows up, he takes what he has. I don't know if he's like, my mom packed me a lunch, or if he's like, I'm so rich. But he's probably thinking, I'm going to share what I have with Jesus, and I'm going to take this, and it's going to provide a fellowship for me. I'm going to split my lunch with Jesus. And instead, God takes what he has, and it doesn't seem like much to him, and it certainly doesn't seem like much to the disciples, and he uses it in an amazing way. And so, if you could pause, if you're looking at that website, go ahead and put that on pause, and we'll come back here and we'll talk about something real quick. Sometimes we can get micro-focused on our needs and not really see the needs of our neighbors. And so during this pandemic, we're frustrated that we're at home with bad hair in our air-conditioned houses. with my 2 annoying kids and wife. I'm not saying they're annoying, I'm saying I get annoyed easily. That's called adjusting the outward, not the inward, right? But the reality is that we get frustrated about how we view our situation, and we kind of lose sight of the fact that there's 8 people living in a one-room house on the other side of the world, making $1.90 a day to support everybody, right? And that this pandemic has them stuck in their homes, and the situation's awful, right? So a little global perspective does help. That's actually the purpose of that. But I need your full attention because I'm not trying to promote guilt. I think that's a terrible motivator. I do. I think it's awful. I think when we promote that we're ungrateful, we're just promoting guilt. I don't want to promote ungratefulness. I want to say that if there was ever a generation blessed as followers of Jesus to go and change their world with their generous wealth, you're here. You're it. And I want to invite the band up to finish us out here. And so as they come up, I want you to think about this. Generosity is intentional. Okay, Jesus didn't accidentally feed 5,000 people. And the boy didn't accidentally offer up his lunch. Generosity is intentional. It's a discipline. It's something you plan for and something you follow through. It's something that you can practice daily. But I promise you, if you don't put it into practice, nothing really changes. You can leave here today and say, oh, well, I understand that I'm wealthy compared to the rest of the world, but I still got bills to pay. I get it. I do. And this is the big issue. If you don't intentionally plan to be generous with what you have, it's just not going to happen because you're going to naturally keep your lunch to yourself because that's what we do. We take care of ourselves, we take care of our immediate families, and then sometimes if we gather 12 baskets of leftovers, we start to help others. Do you ever wonder why there was 12 baskets? What else is there 12 of? Disciples. I think that Jesus actually fed everybody else first, and the leadership ate last. That's huge. And I encourage you, look at your churches and find out who's eating first. I encourage you, and this is awesome. I get to say this because I don't make any money for being up here, so there's no conflict of interest. If I say I would love for you to give and offer your offerings and see what God can do through AVL City Church, I get absolutely nothing from that financially. Nothing. Emotionally and spiritually, I get super encouraged, but I don't get a dime. And that's why I love talking about generosity and giving, because there's no conflict of interest. If you decide to give $100,000 today, I won't get a penny. If you decide to offer the pennies in your pocket, I won't take one. This church wants to be focused on the spiritual needs of our community and the external needs, and it actually can be tons of fun. I want to tell you about AVL City Care from the front. This right here, this screen that you see, this logo that you see that is on the screen, AVL City Care is about something huge. It's about looking at our community and saying, what would Jesus do in an actual way? And it seems so silly to say, Jesus would collect peanut butter? But one of the feeding shelters in town really needed protein that's sustainable on a shelf that they can give to someone else. AVL City Care is just a group of people in this church and in the community that see the needs and want to meet the physical needs and the spiritual needs. And so we just connect with other agencies that are already doing it, and we bridge those gaps. And I'm inviting you, insignificant me and you, to be a part of something that Jesus is already doing. And he knows how he's going to provide for the hungry people in this town, but he's asking you to show up with your lunch. And AVL City Care is just one way that's exciting to give. Every 2 weeks, we just pick something else, connecting with the partner agency. This week, it sounds so weird. We're providing swimsuits for kids. But drowning is the second cause of death, accidental deaths in children in the United States. And most children can actually drown in less than 2 inches of water, and so water safety classes are huge. I didn't even know this, but somebody in the community approached me and said, "Did you know the number one reason why we can't give away free swim classes is because people can't afford swimsuits?" And so people are actually dying because their families can't afford swimsuits because they can't attend classes. That's huge. Is that a problem we can solve? Is that a problem we can solve? It's $5.50 at Walmart before tax to go and buy a swimsuit. And it seems so ridiculous of a need. You could actually save a life with your lunch money. And that's exciting. Generosity is actually a ton of fun. And I know today some of you feel like you should be the ones receiving because you don't even have 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 fish to offer. Talk to us. AVL City Care is for you too. Maybe we can find solutions right here in our community that can help you where you are. And we've got conversations going on with people that need rent money, and we've got conversations going on with people who need their utility bills assisted. We got people that need assistance with appliances and vehicles. Talk to us. That's what this is. The church is not trying to squeeze blood from a stone. We actually aren't advocating that you give us your last dollar so that God can give you 2 tomorrow. That's not where we're coming from. Where we're coming from is if you show up with all that you are, broken and in need, and you show up with God and you say, "I'm going to give you everything that I have," He is going to absolutely change your life from the inside out. That is huge. Because Jesus wants to partner with you right here. You are the locals that He's chosen. You are the disciples that He's turning to. And He says, "I want you to be about change for this crowd in Asheville. I want you to be a part of this crowd's change." And I'm excited to be here because one of the things that this church is huge on is as you go. We don't stop everything we're doing to address one thing, but as you give and as you go, God through you, right? That's really the motto of everything we do here. But how is God going to use you if you don't show up? And how is God going to use you if you don't offer what little you do have? Generosity is an awesome thing. It's about seeing the spiritual and physical needs and then intentionally putting those in your life.